Hello, and welcome back to the studio. I'm Dr. Wigo, and today we're going to talk about intelligence, artificial intelligence, and Apple intelligence. Now, the way this is going to work is, I always have to tell a story at the beginning. Well, this time the story is kind of be the history of artificial intelligence and a couple of places that I have met it along the way. And if you skip to the chapter after that, we'll talk about Apple intelligence. And then the chapter after that, I'll give you my thoughts on Apple's announcements and what it all means, if anything. So let's get right into it. So artificial intelligence goes way, way back. I mean, people were writing about it and theorizing about it like 100 years ago. The word robot was coined by Carl Capek in a play he wrote in like 1920 something called RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots. The ideas of machine intelligences have been around a long time, but they really started taking off in 1950 when Alan Turing, the famous Enigma code breaker, well, he was speculating and he invented in 1950 the Turing test. And basically it was a series of questions and things that you could interact with someone on the other end of like a teletype. Yeah, that was the technology back then. But basically someone you couldn't see, and you had to be able to determine if or not they were human. And the Turing test was around for decades and decades until a machine intelligence finally passed it and would convince at least some people. I'm not sure, but I don't think anything has yet convinced all people that talk to it that it's a human. But there've been some fairly convincing tests. In 1955, Dartmouth had a summer workshop on artificial intelligence. The very first time that term was ever used, artificial intelligence. And they got together all the people and they started doing stuff. And then 3 years later, the Lisp programming language was the first programming language designed specifically for AI research. And it's still in use today, although it has kind of dropped off in the intervening years. 1961, we get to the first industrial robot at a GM plant in New Jersey. It was doing welding because they thought that was too dangerous for humans to be working on. 1966, the chatbot Eliza was developed, which was like a psychotherapist. You'd say something and it'd say, well, tell me more about that. It was very frustrating. It was like talking to a psychotherapist. They wouldn't give you any answers. They would just ask, well, what do you think? Well, what do you think? And my first experience with artificial intelligence was I interacted with Eliza. I guess it was probably 1970 when I was in college. And it was pretty cool. I mean, it didn't seem, well, actually, it seemed as human as any psychotherapist, but that's a whole other story for another time. Then in 1973, Bell Labs was working on voice recognition systems. Everybody says, oh, well, Dragon did Dragon dictation in 1997. 24 years later, they finally got it working. I mentioned in a previous video that my computer science class did a field trip to Bell Labs where they were working on this voice recognition stuff. When we got there, they were working on a very specific problem that they were having a lot of trouble with, and it was trying to get the voice recognition to be able to tell the difference between a nice man and an ice man. And it just, a nice man, an ice man, it couldn't pick up that. We've come a long way. Then when I was working on Wall Street, we had this company come demo us. I guess this would have been about 1985. And it was a natural language database query language. So you could type in how many salespeople met their quota last month. And it would tell you. And then you could say how many of them were men. And it knew that the them meant salesmen who had made quota. Or if it wasn't sure, it would say, well, do you mean all salespeople or do you mean the salespeople that met quota? So it would even ask for clarification. 1985, they could do this. This is why I'm not so impressed with all this AI stuff that's been going on. Now, 1986 was the first driverless car developed at the University of Munich. Now, it could drive itself without any human interaction, but it had to be on a straight road with no obstacles or people or other drivers. So kind of like a Tesla. Now we jump forward into the 90s, and in 1997, IBM developed a computer called Deep Blue that played chess, and it actually beat Garry Kasparov, the reigning Grandmaster champion of the world at that time. By the way, what they don't tell you in all these things is that it beat him once out of 6 matches. So he won 5 times, but it won once. Fast forward another 20 years, and we get to 2011, when IBM developed another artificial intelligent type machine called Watson, which went on Jeopardy and won, even though it did misunderstand some of the questions. Now, that same year, ironically, or unironically, I'm not sure, was the year Apple released Siri onto the world. Well, they acquired it from somewhere, and then, well, you know the story. Siri was the first voice assistant. Not a very good one. Still not a good one today, but we'll talk about that in a minute. 3 years later, 2014, Amazon Alexa came out. So this is when the voice assistants started really flowing. Siri and Alexa and then Google, and they all did it. Then in 2020, we get to OpenAI's GPT-3. And in 2021, OpenAI unveiled DALL-E, cute play on words, Salvador Dali. DALL-E would generate art based on terms you gave it. And it was kind of cool. And that stuff's still going on today. And then 2022 was when OpenAI really made all the news, when they did ChatGPT, which was where you could interact and type and talk back and forth. Of course, there were all sorts of problems with it, which we'll talk about later. And then the most recent thing that ties into what we're going to talk about today is Microsoft brought out Copilot in 2023. And Copilot, well, what I'm about to tell you about Apple Intelligence, a lot of the stuff that's in Apple Intelligence is stuff that Copilot could do when it came out, or will be able to. It's also still in the works. But it could rephrase things and pull out key points. And Microsoft Word had already been using some like AI type things like to pull key points. But now it was getting really smart, and this Copilot was looking pretty good. As an Apple user, I was a little annoyed that Microsoft got there first. The problem with all of these systems, ChatGPT and DALL-E and all these other systems, is they're large models. They need large data sets, which need a lot of training. And you've been hearing all about that lately because everybody's talking about training. I just saw a thing where they were talking about how this next version is going to need 5 times as much data to train. And we're getting to where all the data on the internet has been used to train. And so how are they going to get 5 times more? These large models lead to large data sets, which need very powerful computers, which means we end up with a bunch of cloud-based systems where basically you talk to a server somewhere that's running the OpenAI software. It's not on your machine, it's their machine, which means all this information going back and forth is going over the internet, which means it's susceptible to people seeing what you're up to. Where does that bring us? Apple Intelligence. Now, in their big announcement at WWDC, they focused on some key areas for Apple Intelligence. The first being writing tools, which sounds an awful lot like what Copilot can do in the Microsoft apps. It does rewriting, does proofreading, it'll make summaries, it'll pull key points, it'll build tables for you, it'll create lists, it'll do all these things, pulling the stuff out of what you have written. And they're really fascinating. I mean, the Copilot stuff looks great. The Apple Intelligence version of it looks pretty great. And then their next thing was working with images, and they came up with the Image Playground, which is kind of like DALL-E, where you say, I want a unicorn on a surfboard with a halo, and it'll generate. But, and this is one of the cool things Apple did, no photorealistic. It's like sketch quality. They give you 3 choices, like cartoon quality, sketch quality. They don't give you photorealistic, so you can't make deep fakes or do any of that kind of stuff, which is where AI is getting its bad name, by the way. And then also the Genmojis, where you can generate your own emojis, and God knows the kids will love that. There's not an emoji for what you want to say? Well, make your own. Then they also announced the huge overhaul of Siri. Siri is going to be able to do way more than it can do now. It will understand you better, allegedly. The version of Siri I got doesn't understand me today in 2024, so I'm really hoping this new one does better. It's going to be a little more natural language. You'll still have to be careful how you phrase things. But in the announcement, they showed people like correcting themselves as they were talking to Siri, and Siri picking up that, oh, you've changed what you're asking for. Really cool. And the big thing they're doing is they're giving Siri hooks into all the apps. Apps will be able to have API calls where Siri can come in and tell the app to do things. When I go to bed at night, I have to open 3 separate apps to turn things off and on and reconfigure things in the house. HomeKit has never worked for crap for me. Maybe it will with the new Siri. But now I'll just be able to say, oh, Siri, I'm going to bed, and it'll do everything I need to do in the house. Here's hoping. Mail is getting a little AI gloss on. I'm sorry. When I say AI now, I mean Apple Intelligence. Mail is getting a little AI overview where it will now be able to pull up priority messages based on, like, if people say, if in your email it says something like, I need to know today by 4 o'clock, it will make that a priority message to try to make sure you see it before 4 o'clock. Photos, the Photos app is getting a whole bunch of features, getting things out of the background, touching things up. You'll be able to search by faces because it'll learn people's faces, and you can say, show me all the pictures of Olivia, and here they'll all come. One of the problems with technology is we need more and more code written. And Apple has gone to Swift, and they do all these things to make it easier to write code. They have code training for kids. They're doing all this stuff. Well, now with Apple Intelligence, there will be code completion. So you can start a program, kind of rough it out. This is what I want the program to do. And then it will fill in and make it work. Don't know how that's going to work. Going to be fun to debug a bunch of code you didn't write. Any of you coders out there. And then at the very end, they said Apple made a deal with OpenAI for ChatGPT integration, but it'll only let you do it if it can't figure it out on its own. And I'll talk about the privacy and security stuff in just a second. And then it will say, I can't answer that. Do you want to go to ChatGPT? And you will have to every single time say, yes, I will allow you to send this information to the ChatGPT servers to get back an answer. Because again, and this is the thing that Apple was pushing so hard. So basically, there's 3 levels of privacy and security here. What I'm calling level 2, I don't know what Apple calls it, but I'm calling it level 2. Everything's on your device, encrypted on your device. There's a little neural engine in all of the Apple processors, well, at least since the A17, since that's the earliest one that Apple Intelligence is going to run on. And then, of course, the M chips have lots. My M4 in my iPad Pro has a huge neural engine, trillions of instructions. So a lot of it will be handled on device. Now, there's some things that are going to be too complicated for your device to figure out. So then they have what I call privacy level 1, a little less secure. It's Apple's Secure Cloud, where everything will be encrypted between your phone and the cloud, and it'll be on Apple servers, and only Apple will have access. I don't know about you, but I just don't like that Google knows so much about me. I'm sorry. Apple will know all this about me, but Apple doesn't sell me ads. Apple doesn't keep trying to get me to book a hotel room in a city that I went to 3 years ago. Google does. And then privacy level 0, which is essentially no privacy, is the ChatGPT link where it sends your stuff out to GPT. So you have the on-device, then the secure cloud, and then finally this just out there on the internet. That was a pretty quick summary. But again, you can go watch the Apple event. There's been 1,000 videos about this. You don't need me to explain all this little details to you. But I want to give you what I think about it. Remember, I was there in the early days. I played with Eliza back when it was young. I saw voice recognition being developed in the 70s. I saw natural language query languages in the 80s. I've been working all through this, seeing this growth, but it has become exponential. AI is essentially following Moore's law, where everything's doubling every 18 months. But what about Apple Intelligence? That's artificial. Artificial intelligence is doing this. What about Apple Intelligence? Apple waited. It's nothing groundbreaking. As I was running through the history, I mean, I was naming all the things that were done 20, 30, 40 years ago that Apple has reinvented. Apple has been able to reach so far because they stand on the shoulders of the giants who did this stuff in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. But it's what Apple does best. They take a very complex, complicated technology and make it easy to use. It's what they've always done. It was the original Macintosh, which was a PC that was easy to use because it used icons and mice. And back then it was all, you had to type long commands. And then they did it again with the iPod, and they did it again with the iPhone. And then they just keep doing it. They take a complicated set of technology that there are other existing examples of, and then they make it easy to use. Well, that's what Apple Intelligence is going to be. But Apple Intelligence is going to have something that a lot of these other things don't have, which is that privacy and security. Which in this day and age, with all these AI bots out there running around scraping the internet, you think they're not going to run across your private information and just train themselves with that? It'll happen. Apple's not going to do that. By Apple waiting, which made them seem like they weren't doing anything. I mean, Siri came out in 2011. It's been 13 years, and it's been pretty much crappy the whole time. I mean, it's functional barely for me. But by waiting, they made it possible to be better and easier to use and more private. Now, you do need a Mac or an iPad with an M chip. So like my old iPad that had an A processor, yeah, no good. Got to be an M chip in the Macs and the iPads. In the iPhones, it'll go back to the A17 processor. So it's a couple, because the A processors started to have neural engines a way back, but they were very small. They got bigger and bigger. And the A17, well, I guess, was when it got big enough to be functionally, you want to get a new iPhone. By the way, that's the other thing. Apple isn't going to make money off of Apple Intelligence because they're not going to mine your data. They're not going to sell your data. So they have to make money the old-fashioned way. Make you buy new hardware. So all this stuff will only run on the latest hardware. Now, there are technical reasons. It's not like they're just being jerks about it. They're not forcing you to buy it. And by the way, you don't need any of this stuff. So that's the first set of bad news, is that you have to have well, 2020 basically is as far back as I think anything you have, any Apple device you have before 2020, it absolutely will not work. It doesn't have an M chip on a Mac, if it doesn't have an M chip on an iPad, or an A17 or better on the iPhone. But the worst news is they announced this, in June. This stuff is not in the betas that they gave out at WWDC. So the new betas of Mac OS and iPad OS and iOS do not have the Apple Intelligence stuff in it. They're getting there. They're going to start adding it in. And so it's probably going to be towards the end of this year, certainly fall, and judging from past things, it may not work that well at first. It may not work that well ever. We'll see. I have high hopes. I think it's going to work. But late 2024 for most features, and for all that Siri stuff, the app-based actions and being able to control it, that's 2025. Because the app developers have to buy in and put the hooks in where Siri can get in there and diddle with things. So, but that's not the worst news. You know how many Apple devices there are in the world, right? Billions. You know how many this stuff is going to run on? Millions. Because the first version is going to be English only. We've already restricted the number of devices that'll do it, and now it's only for American English. Your Apple device will have to be working in American English. They didn't even talk about when it might expand to other languages. 2026, 2027. I'm thinking I'm going to have a new Vision Pro before the rest of the world gets Apple Intelligence. But I'll have it. And I'll make videos about it. I'm hoping they'll be happy. In summary, Apple Intelligence, not groundbreaking, but they've taken a whole lot of concepts and put them together and made them hopefully usable. Again, we'll see. That's what Siri was supposed to do, and it still hadn't done it for me. But I have high hopes for the Apple Intelligence Siri. We're not going to see it for months, probably towards the end of the year. And then a lot of y'all, if you're watching in any other country, or you speak in, well, if you speak any other language, I don't know why you're watching me. you're going to be waiting another year or two or more. Especially like the complicated languages like Chinese and Japanese, where they have so many characters and there's so much going on. It's going to probably take them a lot longer there, because Apple is very US centric. And by the way, not having Chinese, think about the potential billions of users that they won't have access to. So that's the bad news. But it's going to work. I hope. We'll see. Let's wait and see. So that's really all I have to say about Apple Intelligence for now. I will have more to say on it later. Once the beta's hit. Once the beta's hit, I'll be able to start talking about it in more detail. We'll start seeing how it works. But for now, it's a promise, and it's a big promise, and Apple has spent billions of dollars on this. It's going to be amazing, hopefully in my lifetime. It's going to be cool in my lifetime, but I'm hoping it'll get to amazing while I'm still kicking around this earth. That's Apple Intelligence for now. Again, I'll come back and revisit in the future. But that's it for now. Thanks for stopping by. See you next time. Bye-bye. I have to go think of a video for next week, so come back and see what that is. Thanks for staying to the end. Bye-bye.